Yo guys, thank you for tuning in to another video. I hope you're all doing well. In this one, as you can probably tell by the title, I'll just be going over the newest round of upcoming changes due to go live on the 24th of January if you're on EU, and the 25th if you're on, the 24th if you're on NA, and the 25th if you're on EU. But before I get into that, I want to just give a big shout out to Blizzard for kind of listening to the community and implementing some very accurate changes on a consistent basis. They haven't been 100% accurate all the time, which you can never unfortunately do. Um, but they have been pretty close to being spot on. And I feel like if they continue with this pace and rate of changes, they are looking to make this expansion really good and enjoyable for most of the player base. But with that being said, let's hop right into this. The first up, we've got Resto Druids, Verdancy Healing reduced by 10%, Adaptive Swarm now increases the effectiveness of periodic effects by 20%, was 25. Adaptive Swarm healing and damage reduced by 10%. Dream State now reduces the cooldown by up to 20 seconds, while Channeling Tranquility was 15. So a bit of a nerf to their periodic healing and verdancy, while obviously compensating a little bit with Tranquility CDR by 5 seconds. So all in all, not too bad. I would say Druid need a little bit of a nerf to their healing anyway, as they have been overperforming in pretty much every bracket for weeks now. So this is a welcome change. Mage, Fire, and Frost, all ability damage by 5%. Mage players will be very happy about this. Some other specs and players might not be, but I think it's very negligible. It's not going to change too much. Monk, Mistweaver, Lesson of Despair now increases critical chance above 50%, was 80%. Paladin, Holy, Barrier of Faith now accumulates 50% of effective Flash of Light and Holy Light healing. I don't think any Holy Parties play this talent. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think with this buff that they will start picking this up anyway. Priest Discipline Flash healing increased by 25% for disc only. Renew healing increased by 25% for disc only. Power Radiance healing increased by 100%. Sorry. Ultimate Radiance increases the healing done by Power Radiance by 10%. Was 100%. So this is a bit misleading. So so these two coupled together, it doesn't equal radiance increased by 100%. I believe this is a 90. This is a 10%. Sorry, healing bonus on powered radiance. So who can argue with that? I guess a bit of a buff to their burst healing, so they can't. That's pretty good. Sins of the Many increases damage dealt by 40% at its highest effectiveness, was 30, and Divine Aegis creates a protective shield for 3/6% of critical healing, was 5/10. Rogue Outlaw combat stamina bonus reduced to 5%, was 10%, and Killing Spree damage reduction value reduced from 65 to 35%. So a bit of a nerf to Outlaw's survivability, which honestly I'm down for. I don't really want Outlaw to reclaim its throne in Shadowlands as being the best spec in the game due to how tanky it was. So them ensuring that the survivability is a bit tuned down and kind of matches everything else, I do like that one. Shaman Healing Surge, healing increased by 15%. Mana Spring now restores 400 mana at 70, was 200, so a 100% buff to that totem. Totemic Surge reduces the cooldown of totems by 3/6 seconds, was 2/4. Pretty nice. Elemental Flame Shock damage increased by 10% for LE only. Chain Lightning damage increased by 10% for LE only. Lava Beam damage increased by 10%, and Earthquake damage increased by 10%. I don't like to see Ellie buffs. Ellie's already cracked out the wazoo at the moment. You've probably seen it running rampant in pretty much three well, not all brackets. I was gonna say all brackets, but it's pretty much in solo queue and 3v3 they're thriving a lot at the moment just due to how much damage they can output in a very small window. So I'm not too impressed to see Ellie buffs, but we'll have to see how that impacts the meta. Um, Resto, Shaman, Healing Wave, healing increased by 6%. Acid Rain damage increased by 120%. Flame Shock damage increased by 20%. Lava Burst damage increased by 20%. So I think this is like more changes towards PvE content. Um, but these damage buffs, well, the healing wave is a nice buff for our shaman PvP anyway. But these damage buffs, we'll have to see how this goes. I don't think it'll really mean too much, but our Shams can already put out some really crazy damage with Stormkeeper at the moment. I've been hit upwards of 175k from one singular lightning bolt in arena before, so I'm very wary about buffing Shaman's damage output right now, but we'll have to see how that kind of affects them in this upcoming patch. Warlock, Affliction, Harvester of Souls damage increased by 25%, and Reign of Tyranny causes Demonic Tyrant to deal 7% additional damage for each stack of Demonic Servitude active at the time of his summon was 5%. So a bit of a buff to Demonic Tyrant if you can stack up your Demonic Servitude enough. It just got buffed by 2% per stack. So honestly, um, I think this is all right. Tyrant has not been a huge threat since the X pack launch. Sorry, so kind of making sure that it becomes that cooldown that people kind of respect. I don't mind this at all. Arms Warrior, Thundercloud damage increased by 30%. Cleave damage increased by 5%. Whirlwind damage increased by 10%. Blade Storm damage increased by 5%. Rend initial damage only, not periodic, increased by 15%. So a little bit of a buff to arms. I would say these are a little bit negligible, but the Blade Storm and the Rend are nice to see. So they'll be hitting a little bit harder on their Rend, not too bad. Fury, this chunk of buffs can probably make Fury um, a contender again. So they've got Raging Blow damage increased by 10%, Execute damage increased by 15%, Rampage damage increased by 10%, Annihilator damage increased by 15%, Bloodthirst damage increased by 10%, and Bloodbath damage increased by 5%. So pretty much a flat damage buff for the spec all around, including the executes as well will be hitting harder. So that's including the procs that they get, and also the the mechanic where if you're under a certain amount of health, I'm not sure if it's 20%, but I think they have a talent that makes it so that they can use it on targets below 35. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so a bit of a buff to Fury. We've been seeing a bit less of this spec since the nerfs to Slaughterhouse. But I think they also buffed that um a bit lower down in the notes, so we'll have to wait and see. Let's see, player versus player. So this is another big change. So Gladiator's Distinction, which is your trinket set bonus, um, increases. Sorry, the primary stat provided by the bonus decreased by 40%, and the stamina provided by the bonus increased by 35%. So your primary stat bonus from the trinket set bonus will be cut by 40, and your stamina will be increased by 35. I think somebody did the math and they said it was around a 25k health increase from that bonus. But honestly, depending on your spec and your talents, and if you have any passive stamina increases, this could turn into way more than 25k. But we'll have to see. I do like this, kind of nerfing the damage output and buffing the health pools of players to kind of compensate and make the game's pacing a little bit slower. I like it. Death Knight, Death Strike healing is no longer reduced in PvP combat, but the improved Death Strike effectiveness is still reduced by 50% in PvP combat. So a buff to the healing regardless. Enfeebles damage done. Oh, sorry. Enfeebles enemy damage reduction against the Death Knight is now reduced by 33% in PvP combat. So Enfeeble is their ghoul's ability that it has a chance that when the ghoul attacks you, that you'll be doing, I think, 15% less damage to the Death Knight, and that's been nerfed by 33%. Rune of Spell Warding's Absorbed Shield is now 33% effective in PvP combat. Rune of Spell Warding's Cast Speed Reduction is now 33% effective in PvP combat. I like this. It's kind of targeting their survivability a little bit, especially against casters, and making it so that they have less passive ways to just be so tanky, making them maybe a bit more proactive. So I like this change a lot. And then Necrotic Wound from Necrotic. Wait, did I read that right? Necrotic Wound from Necrotic Wounds now absorbs 4% of healing done, was 5%, and heals the Death Knight for up to 4% of their max health when the effect ends, was 5%. So just again, oh sorry, and then Virulent Plague no longer deals increased damage in PvP combat, was increased by 30%. So yeah, just overall a nerf to their passive survivability and making the class a bit more proactive. I like this. Druid, this is a meaty one. Rake damage reduced by 18%, rip damage reduced by 18% in PvP combat. Ferocious Bite damage reduced by 25% in PvP combat, was reduced by 20%. I love this. I love this. I love this. If you've been in an arena and played at least 10 games, you would have faced a feral, and that game would not have been fun for you. They do so much damage at the moment. It's insane. So them targeting their primary culprits for that, aka Rake and Rip. I love this, and nerfing their hard hitter Ferocious Bite by a little bit. Not too bad at that at all. Balance, full moon damage reduced by 60%, was 80% when triggered by Orbit Breaker in PvP. Wrath deals 50% increased damage in PvP. Starfire deals 50% increased damage in PvP, was 20%. Star Surge's damage, Star Surge deals 40% increased damage in PvP, was 20%. New Moon, Half Moon, and Full Moon deal 20% increased damage in PvP. Gathering Star Stuff, the 2-piece bonus, grants 15% increased damage to Wrath or Starfire per stack, was 15. Touch of the Cosmos, the 4-piece bonus, grants 20% increased damage to Star Surge, was 35%. An Umbral Embrace increases Wrath or Starfire damage by 40%, was 50%. So overall, kind of buffing their consistent damage substantially, and then compensating by nerfing their 2 and 4-piece to ensure that it doesn't get overtuned. I like it. You don't really see balance too much nowadays, so buffing the specs damage, which is honestly the biggest way to do, the best way to do it at the moment, I think. Just as the meta is so PvE based, I like this change. Feral Frenzy damage reduced by 10%, and Frenzy Regen healing reduced by 50%, was 38% in PvP combat for Feral and Resto only. I like this. Again, targeting the damage, as it's just too high at the moment, and nerfing their survivability a bit as well. And the same with Resto with the Feral from the Frenzy's regen, and Budding Leaves is now 50% effective in PvP combat, was 70%. Overall, I like these random changes. Buffing the spec that sees no play, nerfing the spec that's just running rampant and doing the most damage, even though some people quote unquote say it has no burst. I am reroll. So I love these random changes, absolutely. And just nerfing the passive survivability for the class. Well, not passive, as Frenzy has to be pressed now. So but all in all, I do love these changes. um Evoker Devastation Deep Breath deals 20% increased damage in PvP, was 40%. Spellweaver's dominance grants 20% increased critical strike damage in PvP was 30%. Disintegrate deals 20% increased damage in PvP was 15, and Azure Strike deals 20% increased damage to in PvP. Sorry about that. So a bit of a nerf to their burst damage with Deep Breath, but kind of increasing their consistent damage a bit to kind of compensate for that. I do like that. Preservation, Dream Projections heal over time effects can now be dispelled, and Dream Projection now costs 4% base mana. So I like this. Dream Projection was quite an impactful spell, and a very powerful spell at that. And just being able to dispel its heal over time, which is very powerful, just enables it to be countered a little bit. So I do like that. Hunter Raw Sacrifice now deals 10% of damage the target suffers to the pet was 20%. So kind of looking at the Hunter pet survivability a little bit, which is very nice. Mage Arcane Bombardment is now 40% effective in PvP combat, was 65%. So this is their big execute when you're under 35%. The Arcane Barrage will be doing substantially more damage. They've now tuned that a little bit to increase the opportunities for counterplay. So that's pretty nice. Mistweaver Monk, another spec that we don't really see too much currently in this meta. The mana regen now decreased by 10% in PvP combat was 15%. Enveloping Mist healing increased by 25%, and Chrysalis, the PvP talent, reverted to previous change. Now reduces the cooldown of Light Cocoon by 45 seconds. So I like this, just trying to buff Mistweaver a little bit, um, trying to help make them a little bit more competitive with the meta, which I do like a lot, as I believe that every healer should be kind of performing at least around the same level. No spec should be really up here and the rest down here, if that makes sense. So I do like that change. Paladin Divine Protection now reduces the damage by 30%, while in PvP combat was 20%. Flash of Light healing increased by 15% in PvP combat. Aura of Reckoning aura stacks raised to 100 was 50, and the Reckoning effect now activates at 100 stacks. And Consecration damage increased by 50% in PvP combat. I like this, helping those who choose Divine Protection to be a bit more rewarded for that. Flash of Light, sorry, increased by 15% is nice. And I think this is a nice change as well. Having the Aura of Reckoning PvP talent to proc at a higher amount of stacks. As I think this was procking quite frequently because of how high and quick the pacing of damage in games are. So I do like that change a lot. Holy Reckoning PvP talent increases damage of your next judgment by 25% was 100, and the tooltip will be changing a little patch. Holy Light now heals for 75% more in PvP combat was 40%. Holy Shock healing increased by 15% in PvP combat. And yeah, that's a pretty nice change. I feel like Melee Wings from Pali made this talent very good. Uh, Excuse me. I have been seeing judgments upwards of 75k from Holy Palis with this talent. So just kind of tuning that down a bit to kind of make sure that they're not really doing too much. I do like that substantially, and obviously buffing their healing output, their consistent healing output by a bit as well. Do like that. Uh, Retribution. This is another meaty, juicy part. So Final Reckoning damage reduced by 20%. Radiant Decree damage reduced by 33% in PvP combat. The Paladin 2 set increases damage of Judgment, Blade of Justice, and Wake of Ashes by 10%, down from 15. Crusader Strike now deals 80% increased damage in PvP combat, was 30%. Healing Hands now 70% effective in PvP combat, was 50, and Templar's Verdict, damage increased by 10% in PvP combat. Final Verdict, damage increased by 10% in PvP combat. Exorcism, damage increased by 80% in PvP combat. And Lawbringer, PvP talent now deals up to 8% of the enemy's maximum health, down from 10%. So all in all, they've just targeted the big burst of Rets at the moment. I'm sure you've seen countless clips on WoW highlights or whatever channel that you've been watching them on of Rets just two-shotting people with Final Reckoning into Divine Toll, into Radiant Decree, and then someone or the whole team is on the floor, depending on how many people the Ret can cleave. So I like that they're targeting the big burst and kind of balancing it out with a bit of a consistent damage buff with Crusader Strike and Templars and Final Verdict, and also interesting to note that they are buffing Exorcism. This used to be a spell that was a very nice part of Retribution rotations, and I'm glad to see that they're kind of buffing this up a little bit to kind of maybe make this a viable pick for Reds, because no one's really taking this at the moment, unfortunately. Um, Down to Shamans. Earth Unleashed from Unleashed Shield now breaks on damage and lasts 2 seconds, was full. Healing Stream Totem healing increased by 30%. In PvP was 38, so a nerf to that. Restoration Water Shield now returns 1% mana when struck by melee attack, and PvP combat was 2%, so a 100% nerf to that one. Stormkeeper's damage increase is now 67% effective in PvP combat for Resto only, and Riptide healing increased by 10% in PvP combat was 15. So this particular change I love to see. As I mentioned before, Stormkeeper for Resto Shaman was just hitting so hard, and the fact that it's now being nerfed by 33%. I love it. I love it. I love it. Hopefully this will make it um, a bit more reactive for people, where they can actually do something to counterplay rather than just getting one shot by a lightning bolt as soon as shamans use this. So I like this a lot. And elemental shamans Dragonflight, two set piece bonus, has 50% reduced effectiveness in PvP combat, and Primordial Surge's Lava Burst damage increase is now 60% effective in PvP combat. So all in all, a bit of tuning to the Elemental Shaman's damage, procs from no, not procs, sorry, the Primordial Surge's Lava Burst effectiveness, and also the tier set. It's very nice to see that they're kind of making this change in hindsight. Well, not in hindsight, in foresight, because with this tier set and Primordial Surge, they will be doing so much damage. So it's good to see that they kind of expected that and just kind of tuned that down a little bit. So hopefully that does help make them a little bit more capable of being dealt with. And then last but not least, Warrior again. Thunderous Roar talent bleed damage no longer deals reduced damage in PvP combat, was 50%, and Uproar talent no longer has reduced cooldown effect in PvP. Fury Slaughterhouse now lasts 16 seconds, up from 12, and Storm of Steel talent no longer has a reduced damage reduction effect in PvP combat. The note: Fury Warriors have fallen behind other melee specs, so we're increasing the duration of Slaughterhouse to allow access to max effectiveness of the healing reduction more often. I do like this. It did feel like Fury just couldn't really keep up their stacks for that long when they got to max stacks, so helping them achieve that by extending the duration, I'm not too upset with this, especially with the way that it works now. So yeah, all in all, I don't mind this too much. I would say all in all, these changes have been very, very nice. They've definitely tackled some of the more oppressive specs like Ret and Feral by nerfing their damage. They've nerfed DK survivability, passive survivability, and just tuning a lot of the other specs very nicely. Honestly, I'm very happy, very, very happy with this one. I'm very, very excited to see how the meta will shift and play out coming up in this patch coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday. But we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.